Well, hey guys. I cannot believe this. This is super overwhelming. People I've just met tonight, welcome. So glad you're here. Lynn, just getting to know you. So glad you've moved to the area. So many amazing friends. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. It's my joy, really, to tell a little bit of the story and share some of the content of the book with you. And this is making me crazy. I can't believe you're here. And everyone here is here. It's Tori, so fun. Little baby out in the back. The youngest person here is 6 weeks old. And we don't need to know the oldest. Eric? Oh, he already left. Okay. So, I'm Mindy, for those who I just met today. And you've met Jeff already, and my friend Noemi. And all of you are friends in different ways and from different seasons, even the ones I'm just meeting. And so it's just delightful to welcome you into this space, to have some time together to share about this really crazy journey that I've been on and project that has been in the works for the last little bit. So just by way of a couple of framing ideas, the title of the book is Ignite Your Soul. And the subtitle is When Exhaustion, Isolation, and Burnout Light a Path to Flourishing. And as I was talking to a friend who he's another person involved in ministry work, and he said that subtitle's kind of interesting. He said, I kind of expected it to say, when exhaustion, isolation, and burnout not light a path, when exhaustion, isolation, and burnout get the best of you. Doesn't that sound like a book that would be out there, right? When exhaustion, isolation, and burnout get the best of you. But instead, what I hope the message of this book will be is that the state that we're in, whatever state you're in, could it be isolation, could it be exhaustion, could it be burnout, actually becomes the invitation to something far different and far more, inviting us paradoxically into a journey of flourishing. And many, many people were part of this, and I'll say a little bit about that in a minute, but the main idea of this, in addition to teaching some of the core ideas of the care of the soul and talking about ways to care for your soul, I hope it's very practical and realistic and all that. But many of you know that my passion for the care of the soul came out of my own very severe burnout, very severe symptoms many, many, many years ago. And that just became my own way of life. It's like my own way of life. I needed to learn how to care for my own soul in order to survive. And I had no aspirations of doing anything more than just learning to live again and to live from a different energy source, rather than the constant drivenness that was what I was used to much of my life. And that was just my thing. But over many, many years, I had opportunities to bring this message to others, and especially those who were involved in leadership of some kind, whether it was vocational marketplace type leadership or people similar to me who had been in vocational ministry of some kind, nonprofit work, church work. Because everywhere I went, people were kind of dying inside, even though things were looking good on the outside generally, or at least for a while. What was going on the inside was really broken and achy, and people didn't have words for that. They didn't have language for it. They didn't know what to do with it because it so fractured their understanding of the way things should be. Like, if I'm faithful and I love God and I'm caring about other people the way I'm supposed to be, then everything should be fine. And it often wasn't fine. And so I found that me being able to share my experience ended up being helpful to others as well. So that was kind of amazing, and over time had lots of opportunities to do that in lots of cool places. And then the vision of this ranch came together, and in January of 2020, the Blackmers, Jeannie, raise your hand, and Jeff and I traipsed our way under her husband Zane and her's leadership to close on a remarkable property that you're here now, that we call Whisper Ranch. And we sort of came together with a shared vision of what God might do in this place. And they own the 11 acres at the top of the hill and a beautiful home. And we took the undeveloped land downstream, and we said we've always been living in her basement. She opened up her basement to me many years ago, and we still live in your basement, so to speak, and happy to do so. And so for gatherings, for places like this, for friendship, for very private solitude and gatherings of a few people and gatherings like this, and we just love to hold space for that. And so on January 3rd of 2020, we marched into the real estate office and did all the paperwork and all the transactions. And you all know what the rest of 2020 looked like. And I used to say the whole world went on fire. And some of my colleagues from Glue are here with us today, and know that I was so passionate about my work at Glue, so passionate about the work of that organization. And through the course of that year, the pandemic, it just became clear that this thing that I've been carrying and so passionate about for so many years, many years, was actually people were becoming aware that they needed help, that the care of the soul might be something we need to reorganize our lives around. And so there was a new level of openness, and I began looking at, okay, I might take some changes, make some moves, and in full partnership with the CEO, who many of you know, Scott. So glad you're here. Scott helped me think about the future of moving more deliberately into the message and ministry of soul care. And so that began. And then it was all exciting and fun, as those things are in the starting days. And then, we had our happy life. We've got our 3 grown sons who are amazing, and they're growing relationships with daughters-in-law, or who became daughters-in-law over those years. We had a beautiful home over in Louisville, and December 30th of 2021, so not quite 2 years after we had bought the property, massive fires broke out, basically down the hill from here. So the street address here where we are is Marshall, and the Marshall fire made national and even international news, as over the course of 12 to 15 hours, 1,100 homes were burned to the ground, including our beloved friend's home up at the top of the hill. And that sent me and us and this whole community into a very difficult, Kevin, here you were trying to hold space for the whole city of Superior. Hundreds of people had lost their homes. No one knew where to turn. It was so disorienting. It was so confusing. Jeff and I were Airbnb, going into, I think, 5 different places in 6 weeks. And of course, my work is still going. So I'm traveling and he's doing his work, and we're just trying to make it work. And if I hadn't had learned the ways of caring for my soul in the midst of hard things, I don't know how I would have done. I tried to hold that space for others as well as we were navigating those months, but I got to tell you, it was hard. And people would come to know me in the story, and they'd be like, this is really you got to write a book about this. And I was like, no way. This is too hard. This is too painful. This is too much in the middle of everybody's trauma and collective sadness, and I wasn't hardly willing to do it. But several people kept saying to me, first, Mindy, you got to write a next book. And I was kind of resistant to the idea. You got to write a book. You're going to need help doing it. I can introduce you to some people. Several people said, here's some people you need to know. And eventually, over time, it became clear that perhaps the weaving together of my burnout so many years ago and the story of the fires here in Boulder County might create a narrative that people could find themselves in, and might open up some willingness to help people learn to care for their own souls. At this moment in our world where, burnout is in our organizations, burnout is in our communities, is in our families. We have growing awareness of it, which is good, because that's the first step, is becoming aware. But then how do we then move beyond the burnout when you got nothing left? You have nothing left. Your energy's gone, and you don't know, it doesn't make any sense. You feel like you're not even at home in your own body anymore. It's really hard, very disorienting. And maybe some of you here tonight have had that experience, or maybe are even in it somewhat now. And so that's why I finally became willing to say, all right, I need help. There was a friend, became a good friend, Sean Smucker, you see his name down here. He is literally the nephew of Auntie Anne's, of the Auntie Anne's like world, and does a lot of writing with people whose stories he becomes believing that it's a story that could get out. And so he was a big part of this. And Andrew Wolgamuth was a big part of receiving the idea of this and helping shape it, because I was saying earlier, I came to him, he does representation for authors and stuff like that, and had like, I don't know, 12 ideas, completely disorganized. And between Andrew and Sean, this turned into something that could be helpful. And then Andrew helped us build a relationship with Caitlin Carlson, who's with Nav Press. So to have both the agent and the editor both here tonight is really special. And you'll see both of them in the acknowledgments that are sadly at the very end. I don't know how that happened, but that's okay.
Chicago Manual of Style says so.
What's that?
Chicago Manual of Style says so.
Oh, really? Well, I don't care about, anyway. Are you supposed to tell your editor you don't care about the Chicago Manual Style? Okay, so maybe it won't shock her too much to know that. But along this journey, they have both become friends. And Caitlin in particular stepped into the message and had a loving and defensive posture for the reader. And sometimes you get so absorbed in the thing you're trying to communicate. And she continued to contend for, well, what might that sound like for somebody who's going through this? Or what might that sound like for somebody who's going through this? And every time she would lay her hand to the text, it became better, much better. And so between Sean, Andrew, and Caitlin, none of this would be the case. So I just wanted to thank you quite publicly. So much applause and gratitude. All right, so I'm gonna read a little bit from it, if that's okay. And I don't know how I'm gonna do reading this. It could be a little tender for me, but here we go. It starts with it doesn't say dedication at the top, but this is kind of a dedication. And it says, to first responders, to those who tend to the body and those who tend to the soul. In the 2021 Marshall Fire, Captain Jamie Wood and his teams saw a sudden shift in the wind at 2:30 in the morning. They held the line in our neighborhood, preventing further devastation. They had been stopped 5 previous times because the wind and heat were so severe. Pause. He's told us that the homes in our community were burning at between 2,000 and 3,000 degrees. That he and his team had never seen what you see in movies with a car exploding because of the heat nearby. They were like, that's not real, that's not real. The Marshall fires, they saw it. The cars were exploding. People's home would burn. He was timing it. An ember would fall on the roof. And how long do you think it would take for a whole suburban house to be nothing but ashes to the ground? Like no staircases, no refrigerators, no mattresses, no fireplace, no nothing. Ashes on the ground, from ember to the roof to nothing on the ground. Anyone want to make a guess?
30 minutes?
15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, between 7 and 8 minutes. It was an inferno unlike anything they had ever seen. And he fights wildfires all over the country, lives in Thornton. And I was able to send him a book. Jeff read this introduction. He's like, you've got to send Jamie one of these books. And he already got it and has talked to me about it. It's really sweet. Anyway, Jamie and his teams, and many other like them, there were teams all over. Boulder, Superior, Louisville, everywhere, trying to get a hold of saving anything they could. They had been stopped 5 previous times because the wind and heat were so severe, but then the wind changed and they were ready. At 2:30 in the morning, they were ready to do what they needed to do because it had been unstoppable prior to that. The first responders in my life have been many. Mentors, friends, guides on a path to healing and restoration I so desperately needed. First responders move toward and even run into messes and danger with the intent to rescue, heal, and protect. You're a first responder. They are fearless, gentle, and good. May we all grow in our capacity and willingness to courageously do the same. So I wanted to dedicate it to him, but many of you are first responders as well. You are the kinds of people who run towards, not run away when there's a mess. And you've done that in my life. You've done it in many other people's lives. So the prelude is the other thing I wanted to, well, it's the second part I wanted to read. And then I do want to open it up if anybody has any questions, because I'd be happy to answer any before. Then I'm going to invite us into a practice together and spend some time with that. Fire is a powerful and strange thing, showing up in our lives in two very different ways. As a force of nature, fire devastates forests and communities. Open flames damage our skin, sometimes irreparably. The hottest temperatures leave very little behind. Fire is a weapon of war, a means of great destruction, and yet we are quite literally depending daily on the mechanics of fire to cook our food, keep our hospitals and houses warm, and generate the photosynthesis that keeps our entire human population on this earth alive and breathing. Fire is a source of death, and fire is a means of life. When it comes to our souls, the fires of life can lead us to the same diverging paths. We find ourselves beyond burnout. We've been exhausted longer than we can remember. We feel desperately alone. The fire within us can make us feel like we have nothing left, like anything alive within us has been consumed. Or we can notice the fire and choose to attend to the burning within. The flames become lanterns. The charred ground becomes soil for new life. In 2021 in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, hundreds of homes and countless acres were destroyed by wildfire. Nearly 30 years ago, my life unexpectedly imploded, a wildfire of the soul. Both of these tell the same story, and it is our collective story. Destructive forces can paradoxically illuminate a path for our lives to be set ablaze by the goodness, kindness, and nearness of a living and loving God. Perhaps you find yourself among the charred remains of your life. Or perhaps you simply sense a dryness, a vulnerability, where one stray spark set to the tinder of your emotional, relational, or spiritual self could set the whole thing off. I am beyond certain of this. Our living and loving God can paradoxically light a path for you, as he has done for me. Whatever destruction you or those you love have faced, and despite whatever burnout, flame out, or dropout has resulted, you can step onto this pathway to healing and flourishing. On the other side of death is life. No matter the current state of your soul, may you too find your path toward healing and flourishing ignited. Your soul matters. Fan the flame. So, oh gosh, you didn't, thank you. So there's 6 practices that we introduce that I hope will feel maybe a sideways view of what we currently think of as spiritual practices. And one of the chapters is called Cultivating Healthy Soul Soil, and the practice is practicing delight. There's a quote at the beginning from Thorin in Tolkien's The Hobbit, in case anybody wants to know the source, because we value a wide range of sources. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. It's a good quote. So, here's the beginning of this chapter. I'll just read like 2 pages. What would give you joy, Mindy? What's something that would be fun for you to do? Jeff's question stopped me in my tracks. As I thought about my answer and struggled to come up with one, I felt a sort of panic set in. At the time, we had no expendable income, no extra money lying around for a rainy day. We were planting a church and raising a family, and my major medical incident was barely a year in the rear view. I didn't think I had the luxury of time or resources to do something fun. The harder truth was that I didn't really even know what I enjoyed doing anymore. Years and years of driven living had forced out all the hobbies and simple, seemingly purposeless pleasures I might have pursued. Who had time for a hobby? Who had time to do things simply for enjoyment? I really don't know, I replied. Maybe I don't know how to have fun. Well, what would be life-giving to you? Jeff pressed on. I began to dig deep into my memories. When did I find joy? When did I feel truly alive? Finally, something came to my mind. I said I might enjoy horseback riding. Horseback riding. I hadn't thought about that for decades. Riding horses was something I loved as a kid, the feeling of being carried by something so powerful, of riding trails and galloping across open fields. But there really hadn't been a good reason, because I always needed a reason, or extra time for me to keep doing it beyond a few trail rides here and there over the years. Then Jeff insisted, you should do that. You should go horseback riding. So despite our circumstances, I arranged for a few hours of horseback riding. My detailed feelings of emotional discomfort that day are almost easier for me to remember than whatever it actually felt like to ride that horse. Sitting in the parking lot, I debated whether I was actually going to go through with it. I shouldn't be here. This is costing too much money. We had to arrange for someone to watch the kids. The kids, how are they doing? Maybe I should just go home. But in those days, I was crawling my way back to a new life. And Jeff was gently insisting, even in the face of all my concerns and hesitations and doubts, that I simply do something for the enjoyment of it. That didn't make sense to me, but I had landed myself in a world of hurt by doing the things that had made sense to me for many years. So maybe it was time to try something different. So I listened. I did it. I rode a horse. The whole rest of the chapter encourages us to think about practicing delight. And a lot of times we get to adulthood and the pains and heaviness, disappointments, betrayals, difficulties, failures, all the things become, we feel, impossible to experience joy again or delight. So what I thought we could do, if you're down for it, and you guys might not be down for it, but it's my party, so I'm hoping you will be. It would be to circle up with like 2 or 3 other people next to you. Like say your name, be friendly. It doesn't have to be your whole life story, but something about who you are, be friendly. And then if you could, share something, just one thing, anything you can think of. It could be a color, a texture, a person, something that gives you delight. Fair assignment? Is that clear? Any questions? All right, go. I'll give you, I don't know, 5 or so minutes. Go.